Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay. So, Dalton.
Liars, the McGuinty-Wynne record. That's the name of a new book, 300 pages out there to chronicle of all the mishaps of McGuinty and Wynne. When you first think about it, you go, man, that's an abrasive title, Liars. And then you put together the pieces and you go, well, hey, maybe there's a good point there. Daniel Dickin joins me now from our Ottawa studio, the author of that book. Daniel, thanks for joining me. And what would you say is the most egregious lie that you've chronicled in your book?
Well, like you said, there's so many, it's hard to really peg it down to one. I think that the legacy that Dalton McGuinty and Kathleen Wynne started with the Liberal Party and that has continued to date was in 2003 when Dalton McGuinty said, I won't raise taxes, I'm going to balance the budget, I'm going to be this strong, fiscally responsible premier, and I'm just going to basically be the kinder, gentler Mike Harris. Only a few months later, he said, oh, well, we kind of took another look at the books, and actually we're going to impose this $900 health tax. So that was just a few months after coming to power in 2003. Ever since then, it's been tax after tax, lie after lie, scandal after scandal. Everything this Liberal government does, whether it's under Dalton McGuinty or Kathleen Wynne, has turned into lies, scandal, corruption, greed. There's just really no end to it. So, that started it. That was the first lie. After that, McGuinty was also elected on the promise he would close all the coal-fired plants by 2004. Then it became 2006. Then it became 2014. So, everything this Liberal government does has just become one scandal or another. It's been a legacy of lies, scandal. It just never ends.
Now, Daniel, it's a very dense book you've written. I recommend viewers check it out. Very, very interesting book that shows this is not just, opposition headlines. It's a lot of detailed stuff going into chronicling this narrative. And I want to ask you, did you get the impression, looking at the long view of it, that these are a bunch of sort of goofy people who thought that they could do good but just didn't know what they were doing and screwed it up every step of the way? Or do you believe that there was deliberation involved in these lies and screw-ups?
Well, there's definitely no question that this has been a very organized, very connected Liberal government, whether it's through formal connections, through different associations, different groups of people. This Liberal government has been backed every step of the way by different unions, different associations. We've seen so many things happen with so many different groups backing the Liberal government when it seems like it'd be against their own interest. Then you kind of peel back the layers and you realize what's really going on. We had Dalton McGuinty give the OPP a secret closed door 8.5% pay hike. No one found out about that until the media found out about it and reported on it. You had McGuinty give teachers a 10.4% pay hike, which meant that their total possible salary was going to be over $92,000 a year. We had OLG executives, the Ontario Lottery and Gaming Corporation, given a 49% pay increase. We had the Orange CEO, whose salary jumped from $298,000 in 2007 to over $1.4 million by 2011. So you look at all these things, you look at all these different people who are getting their pay raises and their tax hikes, and they're really very different groups of people. The average Ontarian is working very hard to keep their job, to keep the record, to keep their house in track. And you see these other groups of people who are doing incredibly well. They're all connected to unions, connected directly to the Liberal Party. We have the Working Families Coalition, who has been very closely tied to the objectives of the Liberal Party, although they'll sue you if you say that they're directly tied to the Liberal Party. But there's no question out there that there is a lot of groups that have been backed by Dalton McGuinty and Kathleen Wynne's Liberals, and in exchange for very good contracts and Liberal government favors, they're more than happy to do that. And so, that's just one of the many legacies that I've written about in the book, and that's really present and prevalent in this Liberal record, that it's a lot more than just the accidental, we mismanaged something or something wrong happened and we're going to fix it. This is just one of the many things that's been written about, and just to mention as well that it's available in ebook format, or it's in a paper copy through Amazon, or direct through the publisher at freedompress.ca.
Daniel, I watched, unfortunately, all of the Liberal leadership debates. They were a little monotonous, not too interesting, and I counted the number of times that candidates said the words debt and deficit. Glenn Murray, for whatever reason, to his credit, was the only one who really mentioned those phrases. Kathleen Wynne, nada, zilch, didn't mention it. at all. When you look at at what she's inherited, do you have any hope that they will stick to some form of balancing the budget by the date that they've set, 2018, or let's give them, benefit of the doubt and give it to them 1 year later because we know stuff happens? Do you have any faith in that?
Well, I think it's really something that each Ontario voter is going to have to look at and determine for themselves, because debt is not a new thing. Deficits are not a new thing. There are definitely reasons that this government and that previous governments have put forward for temporarily going into deficit spending for strategic reasons, for economic reasons, whatever the case is. But what you saw under Dalton McGuinty and Kathleen Wynne is the doubling of the debt and the deficit. So right now, every single man, woman, and child in Ontario owes $21,000. That's, any child that hasn't even been born yet, that's born tomorrow, any adult, they all owe $21,000 towards this Liberal government. And that's doubled since Dalton McGuinty took office in 2003. It used to be half that. So while McGuinty did have 3 surplus budgets, he also did it by raising enormous taxes, by increasing spending higher than it's ever been, and we've also seen deficit spending. So what we saw with Kathleen Wynne in this budget that triggered the election was her saying, yeah, well, we might balance the budget by 2017, 2018, but we're going to spend more. We're going to go into a larger deficit, even though the economy is looking better Canada-wide, not necessarily Ontario-wide. They're still doubling down on this idea that more government spending is going to make the economy better, and that giving more money to their union cronies and their Liberal friends is going to somehow fix the 300,000 manufacturing jobs that we've lost, the numerous large and small companies that have just simply closed for good, or they've moved to Quebec, or they've moved to another a state in the United States because it's too expensive. It's just too expensive to do business here. So all of these governments, all of these Liberals are mentioning all these different things they might do. They might try to balance the budget, but clearly the focus right now with Kathleen Wynne is just the status quo. It's trying to maybe sort of balance the budget, maybe down the road, but we'll see when we get there.
Daniel, earlier on this program, I was saying that Tim Hudak honing in on the gas plants scandal and trying to make it the main election issue might be a bit of a challenge, only because I think there's a bit of public fatigue in terms of this guy sent this email on this day to this person, whereas there are a lot of other sort of scandals or clear-cut terrible things they're doing, doubling the debt and deficit. Like you said, in your estimation, after surveying their whole legacy, what would you say is the one or two biggest jaw droppers of, man, this is bad, they should be replaced for this reason? Or is that too gargantuan of a task to ask you to narrow the litany down?
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard to narrow it down just to one or two. This is really an entire government, an entire culture within the Liberal Party that has grown up around these various ideas, these various scandals, and they either try and wave them off, or the Auditor General says one thing, or the Drummond Report says another thing, and they just kind of dismiss it. So I guess if you had to narrow it down, one of the biggest things is these constant tax hikes. Barely a day goes by where there's not a new Liberal tax or a new Liberal policy, whether it's the eco-tax, the HST, whatever the case is. And Kathleen Wynne, to her credit, did say that she would repeal McGuinty's eco-tax after massive public outrage, but instead she said she was going to replace it with an eco-tax on businesses. So instead of consumers seeing that eco-tax right on their receipt, their grocery bill, or whatever the case was, they would see it with the business. And then what's the business going to do? Well, of course, they're going to pass the extra cost on to consumers. Another thing was healthcare. A lot of people don't remember that before McGuinty tried to say that he was going to be the education premier, he thought he was going to be the healthcare premier. So that $900 annual health tax was supposed to improve wait times. It's supposed to get people in to get the care and the treatment that they needed faster. And yet the Auditor General said that only 10 to 15% of people were being seen within the time that was recommended by the hospital. They weren't being triaged properly. So, I mean, then you also have the education system. Kathleen Wynne is especially connected to this now because she started out as one of McGuinty's education ministers. So McGuinty promised that he would cap class sizes at no more than 20. Oh, well, yeah, that didn't exactly happen. McGuinty started rolling out this radical sex education platform that would have been teaching these very different, very odd sex education ideas to kids as young as 8. And on top of that, we had students that were failing in their math skills. By 2009, we only had kids who were working on their math skills and improving their math skills by the time they reach grade 6 by 11%. So those are just a few of the reasons. If the gas plant is huge in the sense that it's $1.1 billion, that's just gone. That's gone because the Liberal government wanted to save their seats in a few key ridings. But there's definitely lots else out there. There's more than enough of scandals, whether you're looking at it from an economic perspective, a social perspective, healthcare, whatever the case is. There's really no positive way to spin this Liberal government's accomplishments, because if you're a Liberal, you're definitely upset, I would hope, at the numerous scandals this Liberal government has dragged their party through. If you're a socialist, if you're going to vote for the NDP, then you're definitely upset at the way that this government has handled healthcare and education. And if you're a conservative, which is what Hudak has obviously been pushing, because his agenda has been the main focus of the first 2 weeks of the campaign. If you're a conservative, then you're definitely looking at this from an economic perspective. And like I said, the debt doubling, massive deficits, more than even NDP Bob Rae was able to
Daniel,
pull off.
I got to interrupt you. We're out of time, but I want to thank you for joining us. And
Absolutely.
June 12th, we'll see if the voters take this mounting body of evidence that many people and yourself you've compiled quite interestingly. We'll take that with them to the polls, folks. You can check out Daniel Dickin's book online and at the website that he mentioned.